Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror comedy from the United States, English language, released in the year 2019, directed by Chelsea Stardust, and this film is called Satanic Panic. So Satanic Panic is about a teenage girl. It's her first job of her pizza delivery, and she wants to make her first day memorable, but unfortunately things aren't really going that well. So her last delivery of the day, she hopes that it's going to turn things around. It's a rich part of the town that she lives in, so she's hoping that she's going to get a very nice tip. But when she gets to the mansion, she realises that the people that reside here are actual Satanists, and they're looking for a candidate for a sacrifice, and unfortunately for this pizza delivery girl, she is the prime candidate, and her night is about to go from bad to really bad very quickly. So whether or not she lives to tell the tale is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Satanic Panic. I was very skeptical coming into this movie, and this is a horror comedy, and unfortunately a lot of horror comedies fail to hit the mark. You know, whether it's not scary enough or it's not funny enough, you know, coming into a film of a horror comedy, you want to be scared and you actually want to have a good laugh. And you know, some movies, horror comedies from the United States have actually achieved this. You know, Slither, James Gunn's Slither, I thought was really, really good. It was a lot of fun. I thought as though there are some other movies that really work, but there are some other horror comedies from the United States that haven't worked for me. And that is down to the fact that humour is subjective, and so these movies are not going to appeal to everyone. You know, the one person might get a completely different experience from the other person, and that's something that is a risk as far as comedies are concerned. Is that okay? You know, when it comes to Australia, we gravitate to British humour more than we do with American humour. But you know, I have seen some pretty good American horror comedies, and I was hoping that Satanic Panic was one of those films that was going to impress me. I'd never heard of Chelsea Stardust as a director. I hadn't really heard too much about this film, although a few of you actually recommended that I see this movie, and I like movies that deal with Satan, and I like movies that deal with cults. And so I thought it had a recipe for intrigue, and the intrigue was enough to entice me to watch this film. And at the end of the day, I will say it is a serviceable horror film. It is a horror comedy that it does appear to have a lot of love behind it. There's a lot of, you know, basically there's a lot of care behind it, and Chelsea Stardust does a reasonable job at immersing you in a very caricature world. And a caricature world is exactly what's needed in a horror comedy. It doesn't want to take itself seriously, so you have to have that caricature sort of flavour that alleviates the pressure. And I thought as though Chelsea Stardust does that. It's a very quirky style of film. It's a very vibrant in the colouring, so immediately you know what the tone of the film is going to be. Yes, it's going to be dark, but it's going to be in a certain way where the characters are quirky, so it's not quite reality. And when it's not quite reality, you're not really as disturbed as you would be if it was something that you could connect to. And so the movie starts off as a happy-go-lucky sort of film. This teenage girl, the main character, she's somewhat likeable, but when she finds herself in this predicament, I thought to myself, okay, well, where are things going to go? Ultimately, the comedy for me is where this movie falls flat. I thought as though it tried a little bit too hard, where, you know, some moments made me laugh, and I was surprised by that, but there are other moments where I thought, okay, well, that was a good effort, but you tried a little bit too hard. You were pushing it a little bit too far. And so I thought as though the humour wasn't as consistent as I really wanted it to be, but I will say that there's a lot of bloodshed. There was a lot of gore, which is something that surprised me. I wasn't expecting that, and so that is a saving grace. It wasn't a scary film, which is another problem. I thought as though, as I said, that caricature nature kind of alleviates a lot of that fear to a point where you're watching something with a bowl of popcorn, whereas actually genuinely fearing something. With James Gunn's Slither, I thought there were some really, really creepy and scary moments in that film, and at the other end, it was very, very funny. Whereas this movie, it is very inconsistent in its humour, and I just don't think as though it really worked as a horror film because of that alleviating of that pressure. That sort of caricature nature makes it a different sort of dimension, whereas you can't really connect to the characters as much as you really want to. But as I said, it's a horror comedy, so it doesn't need that. But I just don't think I didn't think as though the comedy really stuck where it really needed to. So I thought the cinematography was great. Yeah, the gore effects, so most of them were quite practical, and there were some really creative ways of how these people die, and I thought that was really good. Jerry O'Connell, he plays a cameo in this film. I thought it was really good to see his face again. He was in a show when I was a kid called Sliders that I absolutely loved. So it's always good to see a familiar face. He is a cameo, but it's always, as I said, it's always good to see these familiar faces. It brings back a lot of memories. So there's a little bit of nostalgic quality in there if you are a fan of Jerry O'Connell. And at the end of the film, I thought, okay, that was fairly decent. So it's not a movie that was bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I just don't think it really stuck with the humour that it really needed to, because a really funny film would have compensated for the fact that it was lacking in the scares. And so it kind of works against itself, is that the alleviating sort of nature of the film kind of plays against it, is because it's not as funny as it really needed to be, because it doesn't want to be a necessarily scary film. Although you're dealing with Satan and a cult, it's not a scary movie, and so it needed to be our laugh out loud funny, and unfortunately it just failed to do that. But I will say I was never bored during the experience, and it's definitely an experience that you could do a lot worse with. So if you like this kind of thing, I thought the actors had a lot of fun portraying their characters. It appeared that the director had a lot of fun, therefore I'm pretty sure a lot of viewers out there will get something out of it. Whether or not you want to watch it again remains to be seen, but I still thought as though it is very, very serviceable, but it's not one of those movies that's going to last out in the memory like Shaun of the Dead and all those other great horror comedy classics. And so it's not a classic, but it's definitely not a bad film, and so I'm going to give Satanic Panic 3 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.